My judgment just now is people are looking for a way forward in Scotland. You know, the national movement's come to a dead end at the Supreme Court last year. People haven't proposed a viable way forward up until now. Regan has now taken the bull by the horns, placed the bill into consultation. I think people should rally to her standard. Well, as I understand it, they are not going to do anything different from what they've been doing over the last 9 years, which is to ask Westminster to have a referendum. I think that's pretty clear that's not going to happen. But there's a world of difference between asking Westminster to hold a referendum and holding one yourself. If you hold one yourself, it's in the control of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people. If you ask Westminster, then you're depending on the generosity of Westminster Tory politicians. In my experience, there ain't much. Then this is something that's going out to the national movement over the next 2 months. The national movement of Scotland desperately needs ideas at the present moment to take matters forward. It's clearly not going to be adequate to go into a general election and say what we're doing is campaigning to ask Westminster to give us a referendum. I mean, I think we've been down that road since 2014. So new initiatives and new ideas are needed. And certainly one that puts the initiative back into the hands of the Scottish Parliament. It should be one that everybody welcomes. And the fact that Ash is putting forward the bill should not stop anybody who's interested in Scottish independence signing up to it and being enthusiastically in support of it. And a small prediction I would make that the national movement, which is wider, much wider than any political party, is going to be enthusiastically behind this initiative, precisely because it returns decision-making and then the initiative back to Scotland.
Alba, as you know, proposed that at each and every election, political parties supporting independence should stand on an unambiguous mandate to negotiate independence from Westminster. If a majority of votes are achieved for independence, then the Scottish Government should mobilise popular and international pressure to implement that mandate. However, that doesn't prevent additional democratic action now in seeking the view of people in extending the powers of the Scottish Parliament. So I want to ensure that people of Scotland are able to express their view, and that would be via a lawful referendum on the 19th of September 2024 on whether or not the Scottish Parliament should have the powers to negotiate and to legislate for independence for Scotland. So the question asked would be, should the Scottish Parliament have the power to negotiate and legislate for Scottish independence? We're going to launch today a pre-submission consultation, and that is to seek the views of individuals and groups right across Scotland. And of course, from that, I hope to be able to evidence popular support for this proposal from members of the SNP and also the Scottish Greens, and hope to secure their support in order to progress the bill through Parliament when that time comes. But today I'd just like to take the opportunity to speak directly to the Scottish Government and to Humza Yousaf. The bill that I'm proposing today has the capacity to bring the whole independence movement together, to break the constitutional logjam. And if you support this bill, we can guarantee that it is delivered. So instead of putting the immediate future of independence into the hands of Westminster, we can put it back into the hands of Scotland where it belongs. Thank you.
The first thing to do is to say it's competent in the Parliament. There's every reason to believe it is. We have an opinion from one of Scotland's most eminent KCs, Aidan O'Neill. Also, I can say that 10 years ago we had this as a backstop. It was in an advanced stage of preparation. If David Cameron had said no to a referendum back in 2012, then this is the sort of move we're going to make. Actually, I think it was because he knew we were going to make this move that he agreed to the Section 30 referendum. So it's a very powerful thing to have. And I think Regan is bringing it forward just at the right time. Because you combine asking the Scottish people in a referendum about whether the Parliament should have the power to negotiate independence, you combine that with an election result when a majority of the people instruct the Government of Scotland to do that, you've got an irresistible democratic combination, a democratic double whammy on Westminster. Yeah, I mean, it would be possible if the government decided to support it. Of course they can. I mean, you can get it through in that sort of time scale, just under a year, quite comfortably, actually. It's much more difficult if you're a lone backbencher with a few colleagues battling it through, of course. But then we're hoping that it'll get that sort of support. There's a majority for independence in the Parliament. If they decide to back this bill as one of the routes forward to independence, then yes, of course you could make it in that time scale. But that's just an example of what you could do if everybody gets behind it. I mean, if that bill is next year, all the better. The 10th anniversary, I think, would have a symbolic importance. But if it was later than that, then fine, as long as it's happening. That's the main thing. And you can't finish something until you start it. And what Regan today has written, she's like the blue touch paper on a way forward for independence, to break this logjam and find a route forward. I think Hamza should look at things on its merits. You know, people in politics, they often say, oh, well, I'm not doing this because so-and-so is proposing it, or another party's proposing it, or this, that, and the next thing. You're far better to look at an idea, and if it's a good idea, then support it. And if necessary, as a government, adopt it. Governments do that all the time, incidentally. They pick up ideas from backbenchers and then pretend they were their own. I mean, even the government I led did that occasionally. So Hamza, in my view, would be well advised to see that even he's got a big strategic problem. That people don't think there's a convincing independence strategy. Very difficult to mobilise independent supporters if they don't think there's a way forward. This is a way forward. In my view, he'd be wise to take a good look at it, take a calm sook, have a think about it over Christmas, and then by January come out and back it. Yeah, I mean, these things shouldn't, because, you know, the independence for Scotland is much bigger than any individual, any political party. It's much bigger than anything. It's the biggest issue in Scottish politics. I've given an example. I mean, Donald Dewar and I, when we were campaigning to establish the Parliament way back in 1997, we weren't bosom pals, we weren't bosom friends, but nonetheless we combined together to establish the Parliament because it was the right thing for Scotland. And then we went back to debating with each other again. So people should cast their personal views aside, and just because Alba is proposing something, they should consider it on its merits, because if they don't do that, then there will come a time when people will say, well, let's back the idea and let's back the party with the ideas.